Hi, I'm IKEA, and for today's video, we're going to have an in-depth look into specifically the Tac-50 of the specialization weapons, but also more in general as well. We're going to kind of discuss how they actually level specialization weapons from 30 to 40, because as much as we think that we've discovered everything in Division, and that, it is a pretty old game and all the mysteries are solved, right? Turns out that sometimes stuff is still hiding right under our noses, or more specifically, right behind our necks to the left, on the backpack to the left there. And yeah, the specialization weapons do have basically a quirk going from level 30 to level 40. And it seems that that was basically a little bit of a mystery as I was going and trying to fix up the MR list, as we'll of course pretty soon go into going through that list as well, basically the MR in-depth look. But trying to add in the Tac-50 into here, I ran into some oddity basically where the base damage, of course, now that we look at it, is very low on the Tac-50, but then there seems to just basically be a hidden multiplier. So in the end, I had to go in as I looked around and tried to find basically anybody else discussing this at any point, even through Reddit, through multiple Discords, checking if somebody had already ran into this. It kind of looks like nobody really did, which isn't surprising. We don't calculate with specialization weapons that often. But then, yeah, I got curious, and when I get curious, we'll move heaven and earth to kind of figure out and sate that curiosity. And in the end, I did find out what it is, how much it is, and also why it is kind of that way, or no speculation, of course, but we can kind of, it kind of looks a certain way. And yeah, we're going to go into all of that and I know how it is working specifically to start off with, and then explaining how I kind of got to that conclusion. So yeah, more of a investigation on this one, but yeah, it turns out not all mysteries are solved yet in the Division. And to kind of explain what we're talking about, here I'm on a watch alt who doesn't have any weapon damage basically through the watch. I'm wearing all gray builds, basically an all gray gear. They are level 40. They are in SHC levels. If we kind of go to the Tac-50, we see it has 1.42 million damage per shot. Basically, this would be our non-headshot damage. And actually, if you were to fire it, we would get this number, barring any other multipliers like DTOC or DTH or DTH or such, which, yeah, the build doesn't have because there is no build. If we do show base damage, you might notice as well, we have in our stat screen, if we go there, we have 0 weapon damage, and only weapon damage would apply here. So, for instance, if we even had MMR damage, the Tac-50, while it is a sniper rifle kind of sorts, of course, an anti-material rifle actually, but it doesn't, the specialization weapons do not take from those. They are specialization weapons. They do have their own extra weapon damage source, which is from the specializations as well, and of course from Tip of the Spear. If we now go to this, if we had no weapon damage, truly, then for instance, for a weapon type, although for these weapons, of course, we can't have it without, because there's always this SMG damage coming in. So we have a tiny amount there. This would be actually without any weapon damage, because of course it doesn't have its own stats. This right side number should not exist. And actually at level 30, it does not exist. You only get this 312, although actually at there you get 0.48k. Here we get 312.5k, plus a pretty big number actually next to it with no weapon damage. And this was actually the impetus for trying to figure it out, because I was looking at like from the base. I actually did not have the base numbers for the Tac-50, so I was just trying to first figure out that for the big MMR list that we were kind of going for. And yeah, it made no sense going from this base to basically the shots that it does, because especially as well, the base is actually much lower than, for instance, yeah, the white dot next to it. It's true 12. A white dot is, that would be the same as the classic M44, but yeah, that's 433 base. So there was definitely something quirky going on there. And we've, first off, I'll actually give away the resolution to it all and kind of what the solution to it is for those that are interested in that specifically. And that there is a hidden multiplier. And that hidden multiplier is there mostly, I think, although it kind of seems obvious that way once we explain here. That is basically their way to take the specialization weapons from level 30 to level 40. Because at level 30, the base is the same. The base stays the same at level 30. And then we basically get this hidden multiplier on top, going into specifically multiplying the weapon damage that we have, which is an odd thing as well, because normally nothing interacts in that way with that stat, because it's only the weapon damage. It is a multiplier that is applying to basically base damage plus weapon damage, creating this number. Although specifically, because it is in the orange end, it is actually in the weapon damage. The all weapon damage plus specific weapon damage part of things. It's kind of multiplying that orange number, basically. Even if we have 0 of it, although of course there's a 1 always there as the representation of base, right? So it can, even with 0, it can give us a number there. And that number is 3.247. And it's specifically that, even though it is actually what it actually is a power of. So it is 1.125, so 12.5% as a stat, but then as a multiplier, 1.125 to the power of 10. And the power of 10 should kind of give it away, together with kind of here, where we're going from level 30 all the way to level 40. And at every level, I have taken the numbers that we have available, or the number that is basically stated, and we can kind of see the pattern emerging. We have basically from each step, we have 12.5. And for it to be this way as well, it needs to be basically self-multiplicative. So we've also found our third self-multiplicative in the division alongside of Intimidate and Hunter's Fury stacking buff. And yeah, every step is basically a 12.5 all the way to the end. And that altogether makes for basically a 1.125 to the power of 10 that actually gets us a 3.2473, and then even more numbers there. But then there's even more oddity, because it actually truncates after the third digit after the dot there, basically making it that actually this number, 3.247, and then nothing after it, is actually more accurate than actually inputting this into a calculation, which is an oddity upon itself as well, which is one that I kind of right before this video kind of ran into. But yeah, let's actually kind of set the scene for our mystery, and then kind of go through this whole spreadsheet, which will be, of course, linked down below in the comments or in the description down below as well. And for our story time, we'll kind of go actually in the order that I kind of ran into this issue, and I was indeed trying to add in the Tac-50 into this table, basically, where it is comparing the first shot, the second shot, and the cap shot of builds on specifically here a chain killer RRLD setup. And for that, in the past, I used to actually just take shots in the game and then just kind of cut and paste those over here and just copy the numbers over. That was kind of easy, and actually for a one-time thing, kind of easy. But now, actually, I've changed my ways, and we are actually fully calculating out in here, going from basically the numbers of a build over to here. Because if they in the future maybe do another rebalance or something, then this would be easier to alter than the way we did it before. Because yeah, I wanted to actually in the past do it this way, but I just this was implementing this would have been a one-time thing, more work than doing it the old-fashioned way of just copying it over. The results of that, though, were that while all the other weapons kind of fit in decently well, the Tac-50 very much didn't. And yeah, it was all down to this very low base and then a number next to it, which would be usually just a representation of how much weapon damage you have, because that's a number in the game. If you aren't familiar with it, the total damage there, all this is basically the base damage. That is the white number, and then basically how much your weapon damage, and only your weapon damage. So not your total weapon damage, not your DTOC, not your DTA, not your DTH, not anything else. Would apply to that. Just weapon damage would go into that orange number. So this orange number being quite high was a little bit weird, because especially compared to White Death or something, yeah, it was way larger when it should be actually much smaller. Because one of the things is as well with specialization weapons, it's really only all weapon damage applies to it, so not your MMR damage. So on a hotshot build, all that MMR damage that we have actually isn't applying to it. And then only really that 40 from the specialization would apply, that perk that we have, that would apply. And then together with that, just the headshot and such, and the detox and the DTHs and such would apply after that number, but not to that number itself. So there was definitely something weird there, because we were having, and then basically there was, very quickly, I came to the realization there has to be a hidden multiplier in there somewhere. And that started kind of a journey. First of all, just checking with compatriots, with peers, kind of how, if they had run into this. Apparently, basically nobody's calculating specialization weapons from base, including me, of course, because I hadn't done it before as well. Even in the old list from that, we didn't actually include the Tac-50. I just wanted to include it here. Actually, somebody brought it up, and I wanted to add it then. Yeah, that started kind of this journey. So first of all, I kind of went through, and yeah, we have that specialization. So here we have weapon damage and then the specialization at level 40 for the things. And I just kind of started to, what would we need? What would we need to get to this? So if we took it at several, because I wasn't sure if it was multiplying just the weapon damage or other things, very quickly it became clear that it's only the weapon damage that's going to multiply, because if we were to do a DTOC or something, it would be basically the number and then a 10% difference between the two shots. So that would mean that that multiplier is not included in getting multiplied by this multiplier. So it very quickly became clear that it's only really weapon damage that is getting multiplied by it and nothing else. So it's actually in that step of weapon damage. And from there, we kind of tried to figure out what actually is going on. So in several ways of 100 weapon damage plus the 40 spec, and then 10 weapon damage, because I was a character that had the 10 weapon damage from the watch already, so we couldn't go 0, but then also then with the 40 spec, and then 10 weapon damage without the 40 spec from the specialization. So this is just that 40 that you have there. That is just an additive weapon damage, basically. That is the same stat that is actually on, for instance, the specialization weapon bonus from Tip of the Spear. That is also just an additive weapon damage. It is basically specific weapon damage, the way that assault rifle damage would be for assault rifles, just for specialization weapons. And then, as you can see, these screenshots are, of course, from in the game. So whenever we're seeing a screenshot kind of like this, those are in the game. I do have a matching number here. And then basically what I did is just play around with just adding in, because, yeah, while, as we discussed, it is not a separate amp, you can't actually implement it as a separate amp. It has to be applied to the weapon damage stage. With only the weapon damage and the base damage here, we can actually, of course, just amp those, basically, because these two are just multiplying against each other. But yeah, we can't actually implement it as an amp. That is very important, because it isn't amplifying any of the other stats. It's only amplifying the weapon damage. And then just playing around with it and just actually back calculating what would we need to go from this number back to what the combination of this number would be. And that is basically, in this case, so a 224.7 amp. And that, of course, as a multiplier, gets divided by 100 and a plus 1 plus. So it becomes 3.247 as a multiplier. And that's what we needed to go from there to there, basically to have matching numbers. Or at the very least close enough that, although all of these, except for this one, which is, if you were to round it, would actually round up to 49, but or 80, 85. It's kind of small there. But yeah, within rounding errors that we are kind of accustomed to. And then, actually, by tip of Rossi, basically, it was like, wait, but what is it at level 30? And yeah, he was away. He couldn't actually go check it himself. I did. I could, and I did. I actually emptied out a watch ult real quickly and went to level 30 at 0 weapon damage and kind of looked at the number there. And what we do see, of course, is the base damage as the white number. And at level 30, it turns out it's the same base damage. And then it kind of actually hit me that, wait, specialization weapons don't have a level. They don't actually show a level. For instance, as well, if for some things that upgrade or get replaced on certain points. So for instance, you may have noticed once you reach level 1000, you'll get that SHD operative patch. When they want to replace that with a different item, like if you reach 2K, what happens is actually you get a new one that overwrites the old one. So we don't actually receive a new all the specialization weapons anew, of course, every level that we level or such. We could, of course, maybe hide that in some way, but actually what turns out is that, yeah, they don't have a level. They're just level 30, but then as we level up, they actually receive a multiplier to them as we level from 30 to 40. And yeah, we'll come back to these ends parts because this is basically the end resolution of it, and kind of having figured out everything kind of happens there. If we kind of scroll down, what I was then led to do is, of course, to try to figure it out. And the obvious way was to go from level 30 to 40 and kind of keep track of our numbers. So yeah, at level 30, so from in-game screenshots like this, we can see that actually on the weapon damage, we can actually see the full weapon damage. So if we have 0 weapon damage and we have no multipliers going on at level 30, for instance, for here, we basically get the base of the weapon. And this is quite handy. If you don't have the watch as well, you can get the base of the weapon. Although, well, not for other weapons, because all other weapons, or any AR, any such, would always have their own stat on them, of course. Every AR comes with at least like 1% AR damage on it. So there's always a little bit on the side there, so you always have to back calculate. But here, of course, these don't have any bars. So on the specialization weapons, we can very easily get actually the base damage as this weapon damage number, because nothing is applying to it. So it's just this pure number. Also of note is actually that next to it, there isn't actually that like the white number plus the orange number. It's just showing this number without anything to the side of it. Which is actually quite rare because we don't see that really anywhere else, because even unless it's gray weapons, basically, they come with at least, if it's an SMG, some SMG damage, 1% at the minimum. And yeah, we went from level 1, and also what I did is at each level, remove and add in that 40 spec points, basically, or the 40 spec weapon damage that we get from the specialization, because of course we can put that in quite easily. If we boost in either way, we get those specializations, of course, filled in. That's also why we're kind of focusing here on the Tac-50. This does seem to apply to all of the other specialization weapons, but some in other ways. We might come back to that in the future. This one is specifically the Tac-50, and the Tac-50 is also the important one, right? Because, for instance, here we kind of need it to figure out how to headhunter it up. And then, yeah, going to level 31, we get an increase. But, of course, what we really care about is not just how much this number is bigger than this number, but what is as a multiplier required to go from this number. How much do we need to multiply this by to go from that number to this? And it turns out that that was basically 12.5%, a 1.12, well, if we round it to a 5 multiplier. Part of that will likely be that either of these numbers might actually have some numbers behind the digit, although this number seems so round that I kind of believe that will be fine. But of course, this number might have some rounding in it because we don't see, of course, the numbers behind anything except full integers, basically. So that is basically what is likely causing that, causing me to think that it will likely be just a 12.5 already there. And then also with the other one, with level 31, but then also with that spec point, what we are going to expect is basically, so here we have it versus left. This versus left part is this one versus this one. How much is it multiplied by? And what we have here as well is versus up. And I'm kind of using this as a checking number because the multiplier of that 140, if we have 0 weapon damage, because keep in mind, we're using this gray build, which has no weapon damage to begin with. So we're not getting, that 40 is basically going to be a full 40%. So the difference between these two numbers needs to be 40%, basically a 1.4 multiplier. That's kind of, we're using that each time as a checking number. Just because sometimes actually the weapon damage kind of bugs out, especially when swapping builds, and does show wrong numbers. If you were to shoot, you wouldn't get wrong numbers. It's not actually applying, but it quite often does show a wrong number there. So we're kind of using this as checking number and then kind of sometimes having to reload the build to actually get the correct shown number, because I'm not shooting at the range. We're just checking on the stat sheet, basically. And yeah, if we go then from level 31 then to level 32, same story, we get 12.5% again. But then at this point, what we can do is actually start comparing against the start. Because of course, if we're getting 12.5 at each step, this is at this point basically a self-multiplicative, meaning that each step is a 12.5. It's not adding to itself. And we can definitely see that here as well, where two 1.25s have become in total 1.26. So this is always versus original, and then original, I mean the base here basically, although we're doing it for both. Here, basically the bottom one is versus the number with 40 weapon damage from the specialization perk, and then the other one is against basically the base. And what we can see is, yeah, it's starting to kind of pile up. It's a self-multiplicative, so it starts expanding actually faster, than just adding it together, of course, because adding them together would be 25 at this point. And yeah, at this point, it kind of became clear what was happening. It is a self-multiplicative 12.5% going on and on. And we won't go into all of them, but yeah, we see basically that all of them are kind of around that 12.5%. But this multiplier, of course, at the bottom is, well, going very much quicker than it, because 3 of them would be 37 and a half, sorry. And we're already at 42%. And if we kind of scroll to the right and kind of go towards some of the later levels, we have exactly the same. Every step is a 12.5 versus the previous step. And then versus the original step, or versus the original numbers, it is starting to rapidly get out of hand, kind of, because for instance here, with just a 12.5%, we're going from a 2.02 multiplier to a 2.28 multiplier, gaining basically, a 26% worth of a multiplier out of it. And this is also the reason why self-multiplicatives don't get used much unless they're kind of used in moderation. So some games that only have like perks that have 5 stacks or something, they'll use this. Although actually a lot of ARPGs and stuff do go that route. But yeah, they can get out of hand the more you keep stacking them. Although here they had likely a number at the end in mind and kind of back calculated to what they needed. And then, yeah, same all the way up to 40. And every step, every level is the same step. There isn't, for instance, from 39 to 40, a different step, or from 30 to 31. It's also the same. So, yeah, all the way up to 40. And then at 40, of course, what we have is basically 10 stacks of this 12.5 self-multiplier. So we have 12 times or 10 times this 1.125 multiplier. What we can see that as is just to the power of. So this is 1.125 to the power of 10. And then we get this 3.47, but then 3, and then a bunch of numbers. So why do I keep saying it is 3.247? And there seems to be a little bit of that they are truncating this to be this number. They're not actually fully going all in with this number, which you would expect. No, they are actually truncating it to this to that end, basically, where they're dropping it off, they're rounding it at that point, basically, and using that number. And the reason that I say that is that if we were to actually use it as here, calculated with, if you were to go into these cells, what they are is actually the base number, and then at 0 weapon damage, for instance, for this one. And then we're going with implementing this calculation as a 1.125 to the power of 10. So actually getting letting that be calculated and just using that calculated number without truncation. And we just get kind of, we're off consistently. And curiously as well, we're kind of off by the amount of weapon damage that we add. So here we're first at 100, and then 116 for a 15, a 130 for a 30, as I was just adding red core pieces, basically full red cores. If we use it in this way, actually, we get numbers that are a little bit more off than what the game actually shows. So that leads me to believe, because, for instance, if we look here, it's a difference of 100. But actually, if we have this with the a 7, and I'm without that 3 at the behind it, and of course, if we're calculating it, there's a bunch of numbers more behind that. If we actually use a 3.27 and cut it off there, here what we have is a level 40 Headhunter Hotshot. First, without the specialization, 40 specialization, taking a shot, and then with the same build with the 40 specialization here, Chainkill Aroldi setup, the normal setup. And we can see that actually here we are very close, if not, we're off usually by just 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. At the end shot, we're off by how much? We're off by like 6, which for a headhunter actually is pretty close, because there's always some rounding, especially from the base number. There's likely, it's likely not 312k, 312 480. It's likely point like 1 or something, which is kind of annoying and odd, but we have to deal with it. And that, of course, as we put it through Headhunter, which increases the number by a lot, we are always off by a little. Here, though, yeah, we're pretty close, and yeah, much closer actually than if we were to implement it as that 12.5 to the power of 10. So that is odd by itself, that, yeah, they're truncating that number specifically, although it might be just an input number, and then they are just that way truncating it instead of just actually doing it by code. Speculation-wise, of course, this is all speculation. We're just kind of figuring out what they were trying to do, years ago at this point. But yeah, going through it in this way, where we went through level by level, that kind of actually solved it. Because yeah, once we kind of actually saw like 2 or 3 levels, it became kind of clear. It's basically a 12.5 at each step. And they're using this to level up the Tac-50 basically from level 1 all the way to, from level 30, where it's first available, of course, all the way to level 40. And that is in lieu of actually what they do with normal weapons, which is just increasing the base. As we go up, the bases of the weapons actually go up. So they're not getting a hidden multiplier on the weapon damage, and their base number is just going up and up and up. And yeah, once going through this, it became perfectly clear what was kind of going on. But before this, of course, yeah, it was quite the mystery for a few days for me. And what was most surprising as well is that there are still mysteries, there is still uncharted lands to try to figure out, to try to make things make sense, and finally being able to use all this, of course, to then go back and implement our Tac-50 correctly in here into our big MMR list, and as well checking against our in-game numbers and getting as close to it here. So yeah, that was nice in the end. As kind of what we'll maybe look into the future, because yeah, I've kind of only really looked at the Tac-50 specifically, the gunner, the minigun also seems to have the same multiplier. Others do not. Basically, anything that has an explosive component, or for instance, for the flamethrower, and fire component or something, seems to have something else. And one thing that I'm intending to do over the next few days is actually in the burst and sustain tables. I've already made a place for the specialization weapons. First things first, I'm gonna go get their bases from level 30. I haven't done this yet. I need to empty out the watch alt and such, but I wanted to kind of get this out. But we're kind of gonna get them in here. One thing that I actually hadn't ever really considered is that in game we don't actually get the full stats of the weapon. For instance, for Tac-50, it does not actually state a reload for it. But yeah, we can actually go in here and get a reload time from here, for instance, as yeah, this kind of shows how little we actually have spent time with specialization weapons. But yeah, that kind of leads me to the end of our journey together there. As yeah, I was actually, I kind of enjoyed having a mystery to kind of solve. I was kind of in the background as well talking to Rossi, and he actually came up, of course, with the idea of like, hey, maybe it's something to do with leveling. So we kind of went, that kind of set me on the right path there. So very much thanks to Rossi as well for thinking along, and also, yeah, trying to figure this out alongside of me. So yeah, we've reached the end of this. To kind of conclude this video, I hope you kind of enjoyed the story time of it and kind of trying to figure it all out as we finally did, and felt pretty good to actually have a conclusive answer for once, because there's some other mysteries that exist that I don't have conclusive answers to, and yeah, this one at least we've kind of solved now. And yeah, I'm gonna likely continue looking into some of the other specializations, although if anybody else is interested in trying to figure them out and kind of how they are set up, yeah, definitely feel free to. This is open season on on this mystery. I especially wanted the Tac-50 solved for myself, selfishly for that list, of course, and I have my answers there. I'm gonna kind of focus first though on, yeah, we're gonna go on through the DPS tables and also doing the builds collection update videos for all of the characters, and then we might double back and kind of go through the rest of them. Although I definitely will make that list in the burst and sustain tables complete at the very least, because yeah, we can actually, this is one of the places where we can actually get the bases just by having a level 30 character and then no weapon damage, which just a gray build will solve that for us, and then getting the bases and these stats actually at least filled in, so we have the bases, and then later on we can concern ourselves with figuring out how they're being multiplied. So yeah, thank you for joining me. If you did enjoy this video, please do any and all of the algorithm things down below, as it does help out, so do that a little bit of shilling. And for my next videos, we're definitely, as stated, we're going to go into the shotgun DPS table, basically, as that has been done for quite a bit. So I'll show you if you want to have a look through it. I'm finishing up the pistol one. The MMR one, as you saw, was most of the way there. I just want to add Habsburg as a second tab there, where we have now already Changelarly. Going to go through all those, and of course, yeah, the character updates, basically the build collection updates going per character. Those will be coming up as well. And of course, the next build showcase is going to be that Lengmo Pestilence setup, which I've been actually kind of enjoying and works pretty well. And I'm looking forward to showcasing it. So hopefully you join me for those. But for now, as always, have a good night.